Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine War Update Extra where I give you those juicy nuggets to get your teeth into, to give you a greater taste of this whole conflict. Sometimes that taste is particularly sour, as it is a horrific war. But hopefully this will give you some greater context, understanding, information about the war. I look through social media so you don't have to. Okay, lots to talk about today, as ever. I don't know how I have this much to talk about every day, and there's still so much more, always. So here is Ukraine. What are we going to talk about first? Well, this is World War One style trench warfare. Here it's just a little video of some Ukrainian soldiers in a trench on the front line, and this is their life, which is very muddy. Not the trenches aren't as high as ones that we've seen from World War One, but it looks just as sort of messy and muddy. I don't think these guys are going to be having a shower for a long time, and that is the life in the trenches. It is for some of these guys, it is a really thankless task. So as you're sitting comfortably in your lounge or your living room or wherever you are right now in your office, drinking on a hot chocolate or a nice warm coffee. Although these guys look like they've got a coffee, who knows whether it's warm? Um, think about these guys. So there you go. Okay, moving on. This is, you know, Ukraine soldiers claim they found a warehouse of stolen washing machines and other household white goods in a village of recently liberated Kherson. This is one of Russia's positions during occupation. Just unbelievable. These guys, the Russians, just have a real penchant for white goods. They love themselves a washing machine. So they seem to have stolen a lot of these to ship them back to Russia. Right at the beginning of the war, I don't know if you were paying attention then or heard about this, but they were good. So many things were being taken to the post offices to send back to Russia that they had, issues at the post offices and whatnot, as the Russian troops were just basically looting and sending their stuff back. And this is a whole kind of warehouse stacked full of, well, not full of, but with a large number of white goods, just to show what these guys are doing. Moving on, so this is Slovakian self-propelled gun. This is the equivalent to the Caesar type thing, the Caesar Panzerhaubitze 2000 AHS Crab. This is the Slovakian one, and they've handed over the 7th Zuzana to Ukraine. One has been destroyed. In fact, we saw one the other day, I think, being taken on a flatbed somewhere, because I think that might have been either the destroyed one or going back for fixing or whatever, unless it was this one. I don't know. But anyway, the Susannas are decent bits of kit, and this is exactly what Ukraine need at the moment. These long range artillery pieces of artillery. Very, very useful indeed. And in fact, speaking of a long range artillery, yeah, Panzerhaubitze 2000. So it turns out that these Panzerhaubitze 2000s are putting out 300 shells a day. They're running out of spare parts for them. One is parked in Lithuania. I presume that's ready for use. So Lithuania's done an arrangement where they're going to fix up some Panzerhaubitze 2000s. There has been some talk about them having technical issues with them. I guess when you're building these things, it's really hard to predict the kind of usage, or not predict the usage, but give testing that's going to simulate really accurately the kind of usage these have if they're put on a proper front line like now, where they're trying to bang out 300 shells a day. That the amount of stress and strain on all that whole vehicle, for the impact of metal on metal as the recoil of those guns is firing, 300 times a day, every single day. So you understand why they might start having a few issues after a while, and then you've got to start looking after barrels and things and replacing the barrel because the rifling on the barrel wears out and so on and so forth. So it's not just about providing these things, but it's about providing the sustainable maintenance of these things as well, and the supply chain to support fixing them. This is just shows the amount of work Ukrainian forces sometimes put into hunting out things. So this is a SAM, surface-to-air missile, um, outside of Svatova in Luhansk. Actually, I think it's a Tor. Um, in the I'm sure someone else somewhere else said it was a Tor missile, which could be a thermobaric missile that's worth sort of 30 million. Here it goes. So a Tor M2 missile complex worth 30 million. So it isn't actually a SAM, if that's to be trusted. So here, I won't show you the whole video, but basically you've got a video of them tracking it, and the importance of really good eyes in the sky, not just satellite, but consistent drone footage. Here they are just they've picked out this target, they follow it around. You can see there's all sorts of stuff in the video, and in fact here's a bunch of the screenshots of them following this thing into all different terrains until it eventually ends up in one place there, sorry, just there, and you'll see it then gets hit, although we don't really see a big explosion or anything in the video. But I think as it comes off of there, it goes into the woods, and that's where it sort of hangs out thinking it's concealed, but of course it's not. And then it's spotted, and I think that is possibly the explosion of it, but I'm not really sure. The claims are that it is completely destroyed, or is destroyed. So there you go. The effort that they go to hunt these things down, that's worth $30 million. Um, and the replacement cost for the Russians for their entire war effort is just astronomical. Um, and talking about missiles, this is to me, I was fascinated in this. This is a HIMARS, or the end result of a HIMARS rocket. So this is nearby. So what the tweet says is Russians show the consequences of HIMARS M30A1 missile strike on their equipment. Missile contains 180,000 small tungsten balls. So just imagine getting shredded by them as a human being. Well, look, because this is what it does as it rips through a truck. So there's some kind of KAMAZ truck or some kind of supply truck here. I'll turn the sound off. And everywhere you look, it's absolutely, ravaged. It's spotted with all these tiny holes just all over the shop. And you're thinking some of this is really thick metal. That's going to have gone through fuel tanks, pipes, parts of the engine, as he's just about to show you, tires, all sorts. So the damage as these sort of rip through uh, the engine components and important parts of the vehicle means that that vehicle is basically not usable. You're going to have to, I mean, to try and I don't know whether you could replace all those bits or whatever, or whether it's just like game over. That's just absolutely riddled with holes now that it's just completely unusable. Just have to buy a new one, or get a new one rather than try and do that one up. So I think it's fascinating just how devastating these missile attacks can be, not just for what they hit directly, but the shrapnel that comes off these, or in this case the tungsten ball bearings that come off these, and just rip through very thick metal. Just I don't know. I just find that really interesting. That truck won't be used again, and it'd be interesting to see what kind of damage that would do to a tank, and whether the same kind of damage uh, would be rendered to something with thicker metal and with its important sort of inners protected a lot more. Now here is a drone improvised sort of mortar bomb being. This is one way of clearing mines, which is blow them all up. So as you can see, you've got mines here, and drop in the drone. Drop in the mortar round, and then bang, those mines are going up in smoke. That's one way to clear mines. Road might not be in very good nick after that, though, I have to say. Right, now let's move on to Iran. So there was a really interesting article out by Euromaidan. A lot of newspapers have done similar investigations, which is looking at these Shahed drones and finding out how much of them are made elsewhere. More than 30 Western components found in Iranian-made Shahed 136 drones. The investigation, it was discovered that investigators of the Trap Aggressor Project and the NGO Independent Anti-Corruption Commission who examined the Shahed shot down on October the 13th. And this is broadly what they find. All parts inside the Shaheds, but their engines are foreign made. The Ukrainian intelligence managed to identify more than 30 European and American companies that have produced the components used in the Shahed. Most of the parts are US made. Its servo drive comes from the American High-Tech USA group, its batteries are from the Japanese Panasonic, and its ceramic chip antenna was produced by the Canadian Talisman. The Shahed's control board is assembled from Japanese and American parts. The power supply board is made of German and Chinese components. The control unit was produced by the Russian plant Zapad Pribor, and so on and so forth. Texas Instruments, all sorts, different companies, and that's not necessary to say these companies are doing anything wrong, but their parts are being used in the construction of Iranian drones in a country that is heavily sanctioned so that they can't do stuff like this. So how are they getting these things? And as I've said many times, it's about co-opting things that are used for other, normal everyday usage and then using them to construct something like this. Well worth reading that article. What you do with this is another question. It's quite difficult to be able to put sanctions that would successfully stop these from being made. And I'm going to give you an idea of that. So Trent Telenko was talking about, we knew this, that the Iranian drones had these components in, and Tendar says it proves that sanctions against Iran are not thorough enough. And then someone here says, well, actually, let me tell you something about this because I work in this industry. And it's difficult. So this is what whoever called November Dave is actually interdicting the supply of, say, TI chips here is really, really hard, though. Speaking as a computer engineer who's been responsible for building boards like this from soup to nuts, including working with contract manufacturers. This is where, he goes into some detail here. So a lot of these chips really aren't that smart. A lot of the ones I've seen in the AHA TI is avoiding sanctions photo spreads are things like tiny power supply controllers, which are just a handful of transistors. What it comes down to is that most of these chip manufacturers have no idea that their chips are winding up in the Iranian drones because they just sell to a distributor. The distributor doesn't know because they're just selling to a CM who just sells a surplus to a reseller. So on and so forth. Parts embargoes and sanctions are great ideas, but they're very leaky supply chains. The thing is, a lot of these chips, not all of them, but a great deal of them, like the little TI power supply controller chips, are common as dirt and used in everything down to kids' toys. Trying to stop them getting out would be like trying to stop the flow of screwdrivers. Because when you build boards, especially if you use a Chinese contract manufacturer, like most folks building at any kind of scale, you buy the parts with an average, typically 2 to 20%, depending on how expensive or small the part is. Overage, sorry, which is you buy 2 to 20% more than you need because things fall out of pick and place machines, right? So as a machine picks up a chip to put it in, it might drop it, so it gets another one, and then that's sort of lost here and there. Or it gets damaged as it's being put in, or whatever. So you need more than you need to buy more than you need on paper. Generally, the parts aren't ordered directly from the manufacturer either. It's more of a wholesale process. Someone, you or the CM, orders the parts from distributors like Arrow or Avnet, who are responsible for managing the end of the supply chain. Once all the boards are built, there are inevitably leftover parts. The CM usually either returns the leftovers, not that common because most folks don't want a big box of leftover parts, or is supposed to dispose of them, but of course it's more lucrative to resell them. So you can get all sorts of interesting leftover chips off Alibaba. So Alibaba is a Chinese version of eBay. They don't have eBay over there. They have Alibaba. Interesting, they've just posted a big loss to show that the economy in China is slowing down. Or AliExpress, and are largely either manufacturing leftovers or refurbished pools common for older or less common parts from shady fly-by-night companies selling whatever they can get their hands on. Of course, There are a lot of problems with counterfeits, DOA parts, etc., but that's the price you pay. In my case, it's how I get repair parts for older devices that aren't produced anymore. But if you're dodging sanctions, it's a pretty small price to pay because none of these shady resellers, almost invariably in China, really do any kind of research to make sure you're not a front for an Iranian military procurement office. And China is unlikely to do any kind of enforcement along those lines, at least not with the current climate. So imagine you just got a bunch of parts over. Someone comes up to you and says, "Yeah, but online, you're selling them online." Some entity comes up that looks pretty kosher, is saying, "Right, we're going to I'll buy a job lot of those parts." You're like, "Awesome, sold them, got good money for them. See you later." You're not going to check. Oh, by the way, you know that you're Joe Blogs Limited. I don't suppose you're a front for an Iranian military company, are you? And do the kind of due diligence on a simple online sale, so you can understand how this kind of stuff happens. So that leaves the question of how do we make the sanctions work? There are several draconian measures that would essentially stop 90% of parts manufacturing for a while, like declaring all US design parts subject to ITAR, which means non citizens couldn't work with them. Manufacturers could trace the lot codes and figure out which distributors those parts went to, and then threaten the distributors with embargoes unless they start policing their sales better. And then the distributor has to figure out which CMs to stop selling to. But that's a big deal. I don't think there are a lot of great solutions here, at least not for the low level stuff. For the bigger items like whole camera assemblies, the story is somewhat different. But for the enforcement, will still be extremely challenging because the supply chain is just too complex. And there you go. And this is kind of what I've been saying. I don't know if I said it directly on any of my videos, but certainly in chats with other people, is that you can't just say we need to put better sanctions on Iran, because I don't think sanctions would make the blindest bit of difference as to how they get hold of things like these small chips that aren't them in themselves kind of illegal or problematic to have. You can use them to make a kid's toy, but they are being used in these drones. So either you say there can be absolutely no trade at all to Iran, which that's massive and problematic because like food and everything, everyday stuff they need to survive. You're saying, well, you can't have that. Um, that you can't do that. So where is the line that you draw in between completely nothing goes across your borders, and then anything? And then you need the whole world to do that rather than just say, NATO or this group, this trading bloc, or whoever. Will the Chinese agree to that? So on and so forth. So these things are really, really difficult. Anyway, to stay on Iran here, and to bring in a country that I am not a big fan of. I'm not talking about the people involved, but I think the people are generally being really manipulated by a fascistic government, and Viktor Orban is fascistic. I don't care what anyone says, he is basically a fascist. The country announced an economic partnership with Iran. So here they are, like Iran are the bad boys of the world, and they're at the moment murdering protesters who are fighting for their civil rights. They're fighting for equality of women in society, right? This is absolutely a country we should be, or a peoples inside Iran that we should be fighting really hard to support. And here is Viktor Orban's foreign minister, Petr Szijjarto, going and shaking hands with Iran, saying, "Yeah, we'll do an economic partnership with you. Yeah, you're our kind of guys. Awesome. What timing? Just as the regime murders its own protesters and supplies weapons to Russia." This guy is then quoted as saying that EU leaders who supported sanctions to Iran should resign. So he's not just saying, "Oh, okay, I'll do an economic deal with you," because actually Hungary needs a bit of money at the moment because the EU are holding back on a bunch of $1 billion because we've been the bad boys of Europe. So he's saying, so actually, we do a bit of a deal on the quiet. That sounds good. It's not like he's doing that. He's shaking his hands in public and saying, and by the way, EU leaders, anyone that sanctioned these guys, you should all resign. So it's like, not only am I morally abhorrent, but I'm going to sing about my moral abhorrence. Yay! And I'm going to say anyone who disagrees with it should resign. It's like, whoa, man, Hungary, where are you going? You are going in the wrong direction. You'll be on the wrong side of history, unless history is won by autocratic regimes in China and Russia, in which case you'll be on the right side of history, but you'll just be a bunch of complete bastards. Um, in the leadership. I'm not talking about your everyday Hungarians. I hope there are people watching this going, yeah, I have a problem with my government and Viktor Orban. Please don't think we're all like that, because we're not. So I hope that is the case. But of course, like with Russia, there'll be a massive manipulation. So we know that Viktor Orban has got his fingers on the press, and there isn't a freedom of press. That's part of the problem with them in Europe at the moment, that he's elected all his own judges. So he's a judge, jury, executioner in broadly speaking, over in Hungary, and there is that kind of brainwashing going on with the population that we see in Russia. So really, really interesting parallels between Hungary and Russia at the moment. No surprise that they are on Russia's side broadly. And to remain on the kind of Israel idea, Iran idea, here's Israel. No fans of Iran for sure. And they've given permission. This is pretty big actually, because they're a big arms nation. Israel has given permission to NATO members, including Great Britain, to provide Ukraine with weapons that contain components of Israeli-made fire control systems and optoelectronic systems. So these are systems that they might not want to get into the wrong hands in case the technology gets exploited. This is generally one of the reasons that you don't allow sell-ons for some of your equipment. It's basically usually you're selling this equipment to people who aren't going to lose it. It may never even be used. Sell it to some comfortable European country like, I don't know, Sweden. So here you go, Sweden. We're going to sell you you're going to sell you 50 units of this big thing. Brilliant. You're not allowed to sell it on though. And you keep it there. Now, Sweden ends up not getting into a war forever. And eventually those things go obsolete, and no one can ever exploit that technology because it's not captured. Whereas if you're going to give it to somewhere like Ukraine, you're like, there's a really high percentage chance that the Russians are going to capture one or two of these bits of kit, and then, as we've seen, going to ship it off to Iran. So this is a really big risk. So for Israel to say that's not a problem, you can go and give this stuff to Ukraine, is a big deal, and actually that's really cool. It also agreed to purchase strategic materials for Ukraine's armed forces. So Israel starting to step up there. That's excellent. As ever, I've banged on too long today, so I'm splitting this video into two. So if you want to check out part two to my Ukraine War Update Extra, hang out here a little bit later. In the meantime, as I said in my earlier video today, I'm moving my geopolitics and Ukraine stuff over to a new channel. You can find that. You can't find it by an organic search on, because it's just too new. It's just not coming up yet. Those bots haven't scraped YouTube sufficiently at this time. So if you go to www.youtube.com/@ATPGeo, that will get you to this beautiful place. Please subscribe here, and then I'm going to start putting more content into here and phase it out from my other channel. And I have a philosophy and a geopolitics channel. So be better for everyone, better for the algorithms, so on and so forth. Anyway, please do that. And that will be fantastic. In the meantime, see you later in the Ukraine War Update Extra Part 2.